I swallowed the last of the painkillers, feeling the familiar lump in my throat. My husband, Adrian, his gaze fixed on the pill bottle, spoke in a tone dripping with impatience. "You've taken your meds, Eliza. No more excuses, right? Get on with the vacuuming." I winced, not just from the physical pain of my endometriosis, but from the sting of his words. "Just give it a moment to kick in. I'll clean up properly, Adrian." His response was a deep, exaggerated sigh, the kind that made me feel like a burden. As I struggled to suppress my own sigh, a sudden, sharp pain shot through my back. Collapsing to the floor, I looked up in disbelief to see Adrian, standing over me with a sneer. "Stop with your menstrual cramp theatrics, Eliza. Just get the job done." His voice was as cold as the floor I lay on. I, Eliza, at 32, found myself trapped in a marriage that had turned from a dream into a nightmare. Adrian and I met at the sales company where we both worked. He was the star salesman, known for his charm and quick wit. I was the newbie, eager and admiring. His mentorship turned into friendship, then into love, or so I thought. Our marriage began like a fairy tale, but as time passed, my health condition became a wedge between us. Endometriosis wasn't new to me, but Adrian's attitude towards it was. Initially, he was understanding, even caring. But after marriage, his empathy faded like mist in the morning sun. His disdain wasn't limited to my health issues. Adrian's career took off, and with that came arrogance. We both contributed to our household, but he made significantly more, and he never let me forget it. My efforts around the house were invisible to him. His eyes only saw the moments I spent resting, never the hours of pain-filled labor. When we moved to a new house, a step forward in our life together, his true colors bled through even more. He decided to host a family gathering to show off our new home. He handed me the list of guests, a mix of relatives, each with their own dietary preferences and dislikes. "Make sure everyone's happy, Eliza. No shortcuts, no excuses." I spent nights planning the menu, juggling the contrasting tastes and preferences. On the eve of the party, with my period in full swing, I managed to decorate the house and prep the food, all the while fighting back tears of pain and frustration. Adrian, oblivious to my struggles, spent the evening laughing at some show on TV, glass in hand, as I labored in the kitchen. I collapsed into bed that night, exhausted, hoping for a few hours of rest before the storm. The morning of the party, I was up before dawn, cooking and setting everything in place. The pain was relentless, but I pushed through, glancing at the clock, racing against time. I managed to set up everything just as the painkillers began to wear off, their effect fading like a mirage in the desert. Sitting gingerly on the sofa, trying to catch my breath, I glanced at Adrian. He sat there, casually sipping his drink, eyes glued to the TV. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He noticed my stare and turned to me, annoyance etched on his face. "What now, Eliza? Telling me I can't have a drink in my own house?" I shook my head, words still trapped. I just need a moment. The party, it's all set." He stood up, his movements deliberate, menacing. "You're always just needing a moment, aren't you? Playing the victim over a little stomach ache. My mother never acted like you do." His words were like daggers, each one piercing deeper. As I tried to defend myself, explaining that everything was ready, that I was just taking a brief respite, he cut me off. "No more of your excuses. I'm tired of them." And then, without warning, he kicked me, sending me tumbling off the sofa. The physical pain was sharp, but the shock of his action left me numb. I lay there, trying to process what had just happened, as he calmly sat down and started playing a game on his phone, laughing at his screen as if nothing had happened. I was still on the floor, trying to gather my strength to stand, when the doorbell rang. Our guests had arrived. With every ounce of willpower, I pushed myself up and plastered a smile on my face. The day had just begun. As I opened the door, the bright smiles of the arriving relatives clashed starkly with the turmoil within me. Their cheerful greetings and compliments on the house felt surreal, a stark contrast to the pain and humiliation I had just experienced. During the gathering, I moved like an automaton, serving dishes and smiling through clenched teeth. Adrian played the gracious host, charming and witty, a stark contrast to the monster I had seen just moments before. The mask he wore was impeccable, hiding his true nature from the world. Amidst the facade of normalcy, I caught sight of Martin, Adrian's father, standing in the doorway, observing the scene with a frown. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of concern. He had always been a stern man, a strict father to Adrian, but today his usual sternness seemed tinged with something else. Disappointment, maybe even disgust. As the party continued, Adrian's demeanor grew increasingly jovial with each drink. His laughter was too loud, his gestures too grand. It was a performance, a show put on for the benefit of others. I knew the real Adrian, the one who lurked behind those smiles and charming words. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was in the kitchen, taking a moment to brace myself against the counter, when I heard raised voices from the living room. Peering out, I saw Martin confronting Adrian, his voice booming over the murmur of the guests. "What do you think you're doing, Adrian? I saw how you treated Eliza earlier. Is that how a man behaves? Is that how I raised you?" Adrian, caught off guard, tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Dad, it's nothing. Just a little spat between husband and wife. You know how it is." Martin's face reddened with anger. "A little spat? I saw you kick her, Adrian. That's not how you treat your wife, or any woman for that matter." The room fell silent, all eyes now on the father and son. Adrian's mask slipped, revealing a glimpse of the man I knew too well. "She was just being lazy, Dad. You know how women can be, making a big deal out of nothing. I was just helping her get back on track." His words sent a wave of shock through the room. The relatives looked at each other, disbelief and discomfort written on their faces. Martin stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. "Helping her? By kicking her? Is that what you call help? That's abuse, Adrian. You're abusing your wife." The word abuse hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Adrian's face twisted in anger, but before he could respond, Martin continued. "Your mother would be ashamed to see the man you've become. I'm ashamed. You're my son, but I won't stand by and watch you treat your wife like this." Adrian, now visibly shaken, tried to regain his composure. "Dad, you're overreacting. It's not like I hit her or anything. It was just a kick, a wake-up call." Martin's response was immediate and furious. "A wake-up call? You think physical violence is a wake-up call? That's where you're wrong, son. That's where you've lost your way." The confrontation escalated, with Martin denouncing Adrian's behavior in front of everyone. The family gathering, meant to be a celebration, had turned into a public airing of our private nightmare. As Martin stormed out of the room, followed by a few relatives, Adrian turned to me, his eyes searching for an ally. But I couldn't meet his gaze. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely liberated. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests left early, murmuring their goodbyes and casting sympathetic glances my way. Adrian, now subdued, sat silently, the weight of his father's words and the guests' judgment pressing down on him. That night, as I lay in bed, my body aching, my mind raced. The events of the day had shattered the fragile facade of our marriage. Adrian's true nature was revealed, not just to me, but to everyone. The mask had slipped, and the monster was exposed for all to see. The morning after the party, the house was silent, a stark contrast to the previous day's chaos. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, lost in thought. The events of yesterday replayed in my mind, each word, each look, cutting deeper than before. Adrian had left early, muttering something about clearing his head. The house felt different without his looming presence. Quieter, but not necessarily more peaceful. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Martin. He stood there, a mix of anger and sorrow in his eyes. "May I come in, Eliza?" His voice was softer than I had ever heard it. I nodded, leading him into the living room. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke. "I can't begin to express how sorry I am for what happened yesterday, for what my son did to you." His apology was sincere, but it did little to ease the turmoil inside me. "Thank you, Martin, but apologies won't change what happened." He nodded, his face lined with regret. "I know, and that's what I'm here to talk about. You see, Adrian's behavior, it didn't come out of nowhere. It's my fault, partly." I looked at him, surprised. Martin, always so stern and unyielding, was admitting fault. When I was younger, I wasn't the best husband to Adrian's mother. I was tough, demanding. I believed in discipline and keeping a tight ship. I thought I was doing right by my family, but I was wrong, so very wrong. His voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the man behind the facade, a man full of regrets. Adrian grew up watching me, learning from me. I thought I was teaching him to be strong, to be a man, but all I taught him was how to be hard, how to be cold. The revelation was a shock. I had always seen Martin as the unshakable patriarch, never questioning his methods or his influence. Martin, you can't blame yourself for Adrian's actions. He's an adult. He makes his own choices. Martin shook his head. That's just it, Eliza. We're all products of our upbringing, to some extent. I set a bad example, and Adrian followed it. I've realized that too late. There was a long pause before he continued. But that's not all. I'm here to tell you that you don't have to endure this. You have a choice, Eliza. You can leave Adrian, and I'll support you, financially, legally, whatever you need. His offer took me by surprise. Leave Adrian? The thought had crossed my mind more than once, but the reality of it was overwhelming. Martin, I need to think about this. It's not just a decision, it's my life. I understand, he said, standing up. But remember, you're not alone. You have options, and whatever you decide, I'll be there for you. As he left, I sat there, the weight of his words heavy on my shoulders. The option to leave, to start over, was tempting, but it was also terrifying. What would life be like without Adrian, without the marriage I had invested so much in? The rest of the day passed in a blur of thoughts and emotions. I was angry, hurt, confused, but above all, I was tired. Tired of the pain, the lies, the facade. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I would leave Adrian. I would start over. It would be hard, maybe the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I owed it to myself to try. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. I began to untangle myself from the life I had built with Adrian. Each step was difficult, but Martin's support made it bearable. He helped me find a lawyer and even offered financial assistance, though I declined the latter. Adrian returned home after a few days. His demeanor changed. He was quieter, more contemplative. It seemed the confrontation with his father had shaken him. Eliza, we need to talk, he said one evening, his voice lacking its usual harshness. I braced myself. All right, let's talk. He took a deep breath. I've been doing some thinking. About us, about my behavior. I'm sorry, Eliza, for everything. His apology, though unexpected, didn't erase the pain he had caused. Sorry doesn't change what happened, Adrian. I know, and I don't expect it to, but I want to make things right. I want to change. His words were a surprise, but I was skeptical. Could a person really change so drastically overnight? Change isn't easy, Adrian. It takes more than just wanting it. I'm willing to try. I've even started seeing a therapist. I want to be better, for us. The revelation was shocking. Adrian, seeking therapy? It was a step I never thought he'd take. I'm glad you're seeking help, Adrian, but it doesn't change my decision. I need time and space to heal, to figure out what I want. The hurt in his eyes was evident, but there was also a glimmer of understanding. I get it. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying. As the days passed, Adrian's attempts to change were apparent. He was gentler, more considerate, but the scars he had left were too deep, and my decision remained firm. The day I moved out was filled with a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, fear, and hope. Adrian didn't stop me. He just stood there, watching silently as I left our home for the last time. Living alone was a new experience. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom, a sense of control over my life. I could breathe, think, and heal without the shadow of Adrian looming over me. But freedom came with its own challenges. I had to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage, redefine my identity. It was daunting, but also exhilarating. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, the doorbell rang. It was Martin. He stood there, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Eliza, I need to talk to you. It's about Adrian. I let him in, curious about what he had to say. Adrian's been doing well in therapy. He's making progress, but he's also struggling. He misses you, Eliza. He wants to make things right. I listened, feeling a mix of emotions: pity, anger, indifference. Martin, I appreciate what you're doing, but I can't go back. Not now, maybe not ever. I understand, he said softly, but he's my son. I had to try. As he left, I felt a sense of finality. My life with Adrian was over, and a new chapter was beginning. A chapter where I was in control, where I could write my own story. Life in my new apartment brought a sense of tranquility I hadn't felt in years. The days were mine to fill, the space mine to inhabit without fear or judgment. I found solace in the small things, the quiet mornings, the freedom to make my own decisions, the absence of Adrian's oppressive presence. But this newfound freedom also brought with it a need for introspection. I began to revisit my past, the choices I made, the signs I ignored. In the silence of my apartment, I confronted the reality of my marriage, the manipulation, the emotional abuse, and the deep-seated fear that had become a constant companion. One afternoon, as I sifted through old photos, a wave of anger washed over me. The smiling faces in the pictures were a stark contrast to the memories they now evoked. How had I let myself be treated that way? How had I stayed for so long? It was then that I realized my journey wasn't just about healing. It was about reclaiming my power, my voice. I wanted Adrian to understand the depth of the pain he had caused, to experience the consequences of his actions. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. The line rang, and then a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Eliza? Is that you?" It was Adrian's sister, Clara. We had been close once, before everything fell apart. "Clara, hi. It's been a while. I wanted to talk to you about something." Her voice was cautious. "Of course, Eliza. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "I want to tell my story, Clara. I want people to know what happened, what Adrian did." There was a pause on the other end. "Eliza, are you sure? That's a big step, I'm sure. It's time people knew the truth. I'm tired of hiding, of pretending everything was fine." Clara's response was supportive, yet concerned. "Okay, I'm here for you. Whatever you need." I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. I knew that speaking out would be difficult, that it would bring judgment and possibly backlash. But I also knew it was necessary, for my own healing and for the possibility of holding Adrian accountable. In the weeks that followed, I shared my story. First with friends, then in a local support group, and finally in a blog post that Clara helped me publish. The post detailed everything: the abuse, the manipulation, the fear. It was raw, honest, and unflinching. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in, along with stories from other women who had experienced similar ordeals. But there were also those who doubted, who questioned my motives, who stood by Adrian. Adrian's reaction was a mix of shock and anger. He called me, his voice shaking with emotion. "Eliza, why did you do this? Why are you trying to destroy me?" I felt a surge of empowerment. "I'm not trying to destroy you, Adrian. I'm trying to heal. And part of that healing is speaking my truth." His pleas turned to threats, to bargaining, but I stood firm. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to be silenced again. As the days passed, the impact of my revelation became apparent. Adrian's reputation suffered, his once charming facade now tainted by the truth of his actions. His friends began to distance themselves, and at work he faced scrutiny and distrust. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about breaking the cycle of abuse. I had taken back control, not just of my life, but of my narrative. And in doing so, I had exposed Adrian for who he truly was. Several months had passed since I shared my story. The fallout for Adrian had been significant. His social circle had shrunk, and his professional life had taken a hit. But for me, it was a time of rebuilding and rediscovery. I had started therapy, which helped me process my past and envision a future that was mine to shape. One crisp autumn evening, as I sat wrapped in a blanket on my balcony, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. "Eliza, can we meet? I need to talk to you. Please." Against my better judgment, curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe the next day. Sitting across from Adrian in the cafe, I noticed the changes in him. He looked older, warier. The arrogance that once defined him seemed to have dissipated. "Eliza, thank you for coming," he began, his voice unsteady. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of therapy, and I realize now how much harm I've caused you." His words were a stark contrast to the man I had known. "Adrian, words are one thing, actions are another. What do you want from me?" He sighed, looking down at his hands. "I don't expect forgiveness or for you to come back. I just wanted to apologize, truly apologize, and to tell you that I'm working on myself, trying to be a better person." The sincerity in his voice was unexpected, but it didn't erase the past. "That's good to hear, Adrian, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the fact that I've moved on." He nodded, a sad smile on his lips. "I know, and I'm happy for you, truly. I just hope that one day you can look back and see that I'm not the same person I was." The conversation was a strange mix of closure and revelation. As we parted ways, a part of me felt lighter, while another part remained cautious, wary of the man he once was and might still be. Returning to my apartment, I reflected on the encounter. Adrian's apology, his apparent change, it was more than I had expected. But it didn't alter the course I was on. My journey was my own now, no longer tied to him or his redemption. Days turned into weeks, and life settled into a new rhythm. My blog had become a platform for discussion and support, connecting me with a community of people who shared similar experiences. My story had struck a chord, and in sharing it, I had found purpose and strength. Adrian, meanwhile, continued his therapy and reportedly made strides in changing his behavior. Rumors reached me through mutual acquaintances. Some expressed skepticism, others noted genuine improvements. But to me, Adrian's journey was no longer my concern. My focus was on my path, my healing. As I lay in bed one night, a realization dawned on me. In seeking justice, in speaking my truth, I had not only exposed Adrian, but freed myself from the chains of our toxic relationship. The pain he had caused was still a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found my voice, my strength, and with that, I had found a new beginning, a new chapter where I was the author, and the story was mine to write. Months had passed since my last encounter with Adrian. My life had taken on a new shape, filled with possibilities and free from the shadows of my past. I had immersed myself in new activities, met new people, and even started dating again, cautiously, but with a renewed sense of hope. One rainy afternoon, as I sat in my living room, the familiar chime of an email notification broke the silence. It was from Adrian. My heart raced as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. "Eliza, I know you've moved on, and I'm trying to do the same. I'm leaving town, starting fresh in a new city. Before I go, I wanted to thank you. Thank you for opening my eyes to the pain I caused, not just to you, but to myself. I'm sorry for everything, and I hope one day you can truly forgive me. Adrian." The email was a surprise, a final acknowledgement of the change he had promised. I sat there, staring at the screen, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Adrian leaving town felt like the closing of a chapter, a final severing of the ties that bound us. I replied with a simple message. "Thank you for the apology, Adrian. I wish you well in your new life." Hitting send felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was an act of closure, of letting go of the past and embracing the future. The weeks that followed were a testament to the change in my life. My blog had grown into a small community of support and empowerment. I had started writing a book about my experiences, hoping to inspire others who might be in similar situations. One evening, as I sat at my desk, the phone rang. It was Clara, Adrian's sister. "Eliza, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You've turned something terrible into something positive. You're an inspiration." Her words warmed my heart. "Thank you, Clara. It means a lot coming from you." As we talked, I realized how far I had come. From a victim of abuse to a voice of empowerment. My story had not only helped me heal, but had also touched the lives of others. Clara's call ended with an invitation to a family gathering. I hesitated at first, but then accepted. It was a chance to reconnect with those who had been a part of my life, to show them the person I had become. The gathering was a bittersweet reunion. There were moments of awkwardness, but also moments of genuine connection. I realized that while my relationship with Adrian was over, my relationships with others in his family didn't have to be. As I drove home that evening, the city lights reflecting in the rain-soaked streets, I felt a sense of peace. The journey I had embarked on had been long and challenging, but it had led me to a place of strength and self-discovery. My story was one of many, a single thread in the tapestry of life, but it was a thread woven with resilience, courage, and hope, a testament to the power of speaking out, of standing up for oneself. I had found my voice in the darkness, and in doing so, I had found the light. And with that light, I stepped forward into a new dawn, ready to write the next chapter of my life. I pushed open the front door, my bones aching after a grueling night shift at the ER. The house was quiet, too quiet for 7 a.m. Usually Leon would be bustling around the kitchen, brewing coffee and packing Tyler's lunch for school. "Leon?" I called out, kicking off my shoes. "Tyler?" No answer. My heart quickened as I rounded the corner into the living room. There, on our faded floral couch, sat Leon. A large suitcase rested at his feet. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you home at this hour and with luggage?" Leon's eyes met mine, and I saw a mixture of guilt and determination that made my stomach churn. "We need to talk, Irma," he said, his voice steady. "It's about us. And Edith, I'm leaving." The room spun. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "Edith, your secretary? What do you mean you're leaving?" Leon stood, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I've been having an affair with Edith for months now, and she's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled to the armchair across from him, collapsing into it. "Pregnant?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "How far along?" 7 months, Leon replied, not meeting my eyes. 7 months. The realization dawned on me slowly, then all at once. "The conference in Chicago," I said, my voice hollow. "You told me you were going alone." Leon nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry, Irma. Bliss, I never meant for this to happen, but I can't ignore my feelings anymore. I want a divorce." "A divorce?" The word echoed in the suddenly too small room. "What about Tyler? What about our family?" "Tyler's almost grown," Leon said, as if that made it all okay. "He'll understand eventually." Anger flared within me, hot and fierce. "Understand that his father is abandoning his family for a woman half his age? That you're throwing away 17 years of marriage?" Leon flinched, but stood his ground. "I know this is a shock, Irma, but Edith and we have a connection. She understands me in a way you never have." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, I'm sure she does, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that she's young and doesn't have crow's feet or stretch marks." "It's not like that," Leon protested weakly. "Then what is it like?" I demanded, rising to my feet. "Explain it to me, Leon. Help me understand how you could do this to us." Before he could answer, the front door opened. Tyler's voice called out, "Mom? Dad? Why are you both home?" Leon and I froze, staring at each other. In that moment, I saw a flicker of doubt cross Leon's face. But then he squared his shoulders and called out, "In here, son." Tyler appeared in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His eyes darted between us, taking in the suitcase, the tension crackling in the air. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I tell our son that his father was leaving us? Leon stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Tyler, there's something we need to talk about. Your mother and we're going to be separating." Tyler's face crumpled. "What? Why?" I found my voice then, fierce and protective. "Your father has decided he'd rather start a new family with his secretary." "Irma," Leon warned, but I ignored him. Tyler's eyes widened in disbelief. "Dad, is that true?" Leon sighed heavily. "It's complicated, son, but yes, I'm leaving. I'm sorry." Tyler's face hardened, a look I'd never seen before settling over his features. "So you're just going to abandon us? Just like that?" "Tyler, please try to understand," Leon began, but Tyler cut him off. "Understand what? That you're a selfish jerk who doesn't care about anyone but himself?" Tyler spat, tears welling in his eyes. He turned to me, his voice breaking. "Mom?" I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight as he began to sob. Over his head, I met Leon's gaze, my own eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and determination. "You want to leave?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Then go. But don't think for a second that this is over. You have no idea what you've just started." The day after Leon left, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, staring blankly at a cold cup of coffee. The house felt empty, hollow. Tyler had barely spoken a word since his father's departure, shutting himself in his room. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my daze. I opened the door to find Tessa, my best friend since college, standing there with a determined look on her face. "All right, spill it," she said, marching past me into the kitchen. "I got your cryptic text. What's this about Leon leaving?" I sank back into my chair, the weight of everything crashing down on me. "He's having an affair with his secretary, Edith. She's pregnant." Tessa's jaw dropped. "There's more," I interrupted. "He wants a divorce." Tessa's eyes flashed with anger. "Oh, hell no, we're not letting him get away with this." Before I could respond, there was another knock at the door. I opened it to find my mother, Lorraine, standing there with a suitcase. "Mom?" I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to help, of course," she said, bustling past me. "A mother always knows when her child needs her." I shot Tessa a panicked look. My relationship with my mother was complicated at best, and her traditional views often clashed with my more modern outlook. "Irma, dear," Lorraine said, settling herself at the kitchen table, "you need to fight for your marriage. This Edith woman cannot take what's yours." I felt a flare of irritation. "Mom, I don't know if fighting is the right answer, but I won't let him walk away so easily." Tessa nodded approvingly. "That's right. We need a plan." "A plan?" Lorraine looked scandalized. "The only plan you need is to win your husband back. Have you let yourself go, Irma? Maybe if you put in a little more effort." "Mom," I snapped, "this isn't about me letting myself go. Leon made a choice to betray our family." Tessa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "What if we dig into this Edith character? I bet she's not as innocent as she seems." I hesitated, torn between my desire for answers and my fear of what I might find. "I don't know." "Nonsense," Lorraine interjected. "A good wife doesn't snoop. She trusts her husband." "A good husband doesn't cheat," Tessa shot back. As they argued, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leon. "We need to talk about the house. I'm coming over tomorrow." My heart raced. "He's coming here tomorrow," I said, interrupting their bickering, "to talk about the house." Lorraine perked up. "Perfect. This is your chance to win him back." Tessa rolled her eyes. "Or your chance to show him what he's losing." I stood up, suddenly feeling suffocated. "I need some air," I muttered, heading for the back porch. Outside, I took deep breaths, trying to clear my head. The sound of the door opening made me turn. It was Tyler. "Mom," he said, his voice small. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, honey. Just thinking." He came to stand beside me, looking out at the yard. I heard Grandma and Tessa arguing. "What are you going to do?" I sighed, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "I don't know yet, but whatever happens, we'll get through it together. Okay?" Tyler nodded, leaning into me. "I hate him for doing this to us," he whispered. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized then that this wasn't just about me and Leon anymore. It was about our family, about Tyler. "I know, sweetie," I said, hugging him tighter. "I'm angry, too, but we can't let that anger consume us." As we stood there, I felt a resolve building within me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Leon or Edith destroy what I'd spent years building. I turned back to the house, where I could still hear Tessa and my mother arguing. It was time to take control of this situation. Time to show Leon exactly what he was walking away from. And if that meant uncovering some uncomfortable truths about Edith along the way, well, so be it. The morning Leon was due to arrive, I woke early, my stomach in knots. Tessa had stayed over, camping out on the couch to offer moral support. As I made coffee, she joined me in the kitchen, her hair a mess but her eyes alert. "Ready for battle?" she asked, accepting a steaming mug. I nodded grimly. "As I'll ever be." The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. Leon always was punctual, even in the midst of destroying our family. I opened the door, steeling myself. "Irma," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, leading him to the kitchen where Tessa sat, arms crossed. Leon's eyebrows rose slightly at her presence, but he said nothing. "Let's get this over with," I said, sitting down. "You wanted to talk about the house?" Leon cleared his throat. "Yes, I think it would be best if you and Tyler stayed here. I'll find an apartment." "How generous of you," Tessa muttered. I shot her a warning look before turning back to Leon. "And the mortgage? The bills?" "I'll continue to pay my share, of course," he said. "I want to make this as easy as possible for everyone." Something in me snapped. "Easy?" I laughed bitterly. "How could you do this to our family, Leon?" He flinched, guilt flashing across his face. "I'm sorry, Irma. Edith's the one I want now. I can't change how I feel." "And what about how Tyler feels?" I demanded. "Have you even thought about what this is doing to him?" Leon's face crumpled. "Of course I have. I love Tyler. You have a funny way of showing it," Tessa interjected. Before Leon could respond, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, frowning at the unfamiliar number. "Hello? Is this Irma Lawson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Sandra. I used to work with Edith. There's something you need to know." My heart raced. "Go on." "Edith has a history of, well, using men for personal gain. She's done this before, at our old company. Got involved with the CEO, claimed she was pregnant. It was a whole mess." I gripped the phone tighter, aware of Leon and Tessa's curious stares. Thank you for telling me, Sandra. Can we meet? After arranging to meet Sandra later that day, I hung up, my mind reeling. What was that about? Leon asked. I looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time in days. He looked tired, conflicted. Part of me wanted to tell him everything, to shake him and make him see how he'd been manipulated. But another part, a stronger part, wanted answers first. Nothing important, I lied smoothly. Now about the house. We hammered out the details, Leon agreeing to more than I expected. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Irma, I am sorry. For everything. I met his gaze steadily. Sorry isn't enough, Leon, not this time. After he left, Tessa turned to me expectantly. Spill, what was that phone call really about? I told her everything Sandra had said, watching her eyes widen. Holy crap, she breathed. So Edith's a professional homewrecker? Seems like it, I said grimly. And I'm going to find out everything I can about her. Tessa grinned, a fierce light in her eyes. Count me in. Operation Takedown Edith is a go. As we began to plan, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. Anger at Leon's betrayal, determination to protect my family, and a growing desire for justice. Or was it revenge? One thing was certain. Edith had no idea who she was messing with. And by the time I was done, she'd regret ever laying eyes on Leon Lawson. The cafe was bustling when I arrived to meet Sandra. Tessa had insisted on coming along, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Sandra was easy to spot, a petite woman with graying hair and kind eyes. As we sat down, she leaned in, her voice low. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Irma, but I couldn't stand by and watch Edith destroy another family. I took a deep breath. Tell me everything. For the next hour, Sandra painted a picture of Edith that made my blood run cold. Multiple affairs, each ending with claims of pregnancy and demands for money. A trail of broken marriages and shattered lives left in her wake. She's ruthless, Sandra finished, and she always gets what she wants. I felt sick. Does she ever actually have the babies? Sandra shook her head. Never. There's always a convenient miscarriage right after she gets a big payout. Tessa's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. We need to tell Leon, she said, but I hesitated. Would he even believe me? Or would Edith's hold on him be too strong? As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text from Leon. Need to talk. Can you meet me at the house in an hour? I showed Tessa the message, my heart racing. This is it, I said. I have to confront him with what we know. We thanked Sandra and left, my mind whirling with plans. At home, I gathered the evidence we'd collected. Bank statements showing large transfers from Leon's account to Edith's, photos of her with other married men, Sandra's sworn statement. Tessa helped me organize everything into a folder. Are you sure you want to do this alone? She asked, worry etched on her face. I nodded. I have to. This is between me and Leon. As I waited for Leon to arrive, I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say. But when he walked in, all my carefully prepared words evaporated. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. Irma, he said, his voice cracking. I've made a terrible mistake. For a moment, hope flared in my chest. But then he continued. Edith wants me to sell the house. She says we need the money for the baby, for our new life together. Rage surged through me. And you're actually considering it? Leon wouldn't meet my eyes. I don't know what else to do. She says if I don't, she'll leave, take the baby and disappear. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, Leon, you poor deluded fool. His head snapped up, confusion and anger warring on his face. What's that supposed to mean? I grabbed the folder, thrusting it at him. It means you've been played. Edith is a con artist, Leon. This is what she does. Seduces married men, fakes pregnancies, bleeds them dry. Leon's face paled as he flipped through the documents. This can't be true. It is, I said, my voice steady. And deep down I think you know it. You just didn't want to see it. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. What have I done? He whispered. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out. But a stronger part, the part that had been forged in the fire of his betrayal, held firm. You've destroyed our family, I said, and now you have a choice to make. You can continue down this path with Edith, sell our home, and lose everything. Or you can wake up and fight back. Leon looked up at me, his eyes pleading. What should I do? I shook my head. I can't make that decision for you, Leon, but I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to expose Edith for who she really is, with or without your help. As I turned to leave, Leon called out, Irma, wait, I want to help. Tell me what to do. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. This was it, the moment that would define everything that came after. I took a deep breath and turned back to face my husband, ready to plan our next move. The charity gala was in full swing when I arrived, my heart pounding beneath the sleek black dress I'd chosen for the occasion. Leon stood by my side, his face a mask of nervous determination. We'd agreed that confronting Edith here, in public, was our best chance of exposing her true nature. Are you sure about this? Leon whispered as we made our way through the crowd. I nodded, my jaw set. It's time to end this, once and for all. We spotted Edith across the room, her pregnancy on full display in a form-fitting gown. She was chatting animatedly with a group of Leon's colleagues, her hand resting possessively on her swollen belly. As we approached, I saw the moment Edith noticed us. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, a calculating look crossing her face. Leon, darling, she called out, her voice syrupy sweet. I didn't expect to see you here, and... Irma, what a surprise. I forced a smile. Hello, Edith. We need to talk. Edith's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. Of course, dear. Why don't we step outside for a moment? As we moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom, I could feel the tension radiating off Leon. This was it, the moment of truth. What's this about? Edith asked, her hand protectively cradling her belly. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It's about your lies, Edith, all of them. Her face hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, I said, pulling out the folder of evidence. We know about your past, Edith. The other men, the fake pregnancies, the cons. Edith's eyes darted between me and Leon, her composure cracking. Leon, don't listen to her. She's just a bitter wife who can't the truth. But Leon stood firm. Is it true, Edith? Have you been lying to me this whole time? Edith's demeanor changed in an instant. Gone was the sweet, vulnerable facade. In its place was a cold, calculating woman. So what if I have? She spat. You were so easy to manipulate, Leon. A few tears, a fake pregnancy test, and you were putty in my hands. I watched as the color drained from Leon's face. The baby, he whispered. Edith laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. Oh, there's a baby all right, but who knows if it's yours? You're not the only man I've been seeing, Leon. The admission hit us both like a physical blow. I'd suspected, of course, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. You've lied about everything, I said, my voice shaking with anger. All you care about is yourself. Edith turned to me, her eyes blazing. And what about you, Irma? You think you're so much better? Look at you, scheming and plotting. You're no different from me. Her words struck a chord, making me question everything I'd done. Was I really any better than Edith? Had my desire for revenge turned me into someone I didn't recognize? Before I could respond, Leon stepped forward. That's enough, Edith. It's over. Whatever game you were playing, you've lost. Edith's face contorted with rage. You think this is over? I'll ruin you, Leon. I'll take everything you have. As she stormed off, leaving us standing there in shocked silence, I realized we'd won. But at what cost? The truth was out, but the damage had been done. Leon turned to me, his eyes filled with remorse and confusion. Irma, I don't know what to say. I've been such a fool. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. The man I'd loved for 17 years, the father of my child, stood before me, broken and humbled. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out, but another part, the part that had endured the pain and betrayal, held back. What happens now? Leon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, knowing my next words would shape our future. The easy path would be forgiveness, trying to rebuild what we'd lost. But as I stood there, I realized I had a choice to make, not just for myself, but for Tyler, for our family. Now, I said, my voice steady, we figure out how to move forward. But Leon, I need you to understand something. Things can never go back to the way they were. As I watched the realization dawn on Leon's face, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The confrontation with Edith had exposed more than just her lies. It had laid bare the cracks in our own relationship, the trust that had been irreparably broken. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days following the confrontation with Edith were a blur of legal meetings and tense conversations. Leon had moved back home, sleeping in the guest room while we tried to navigate our new reality. But the fragile peace we'd established was about to shatter. I was in the kitchen, mechanically stirring a pot of soup, when I heard the front door slam. Tyler stormed in, his face a mask of fury. "He's still talking to her," he spat, throwing his backpack on the floor. I saw them together at the coffee shop near school. My hand froze on the spoon. "What? Are you sure?" Tyler nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. "They were arguing. I heard him say he couldn't just abandon her, that he had responsibilities." The room spun. I gripped the counter to steady myself, bile rising in my throat. After everything we'd been through, after all the lies we'd uncovered, Leon was still torn. As if summoned by our conversation, Leon walked in, his face pale and drawn. He stopped short when he saw us, the guilt written plainly across his features. "You saw her," I said, my voice flat. It wasn't a question. Leon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Irma. The baby might not even be yours," I exploded, the weeks of pent-up anger and hurt finally boiling over. "How can you still be considering this?" Tyler stepped between us, his young face set in lines of determination that made him look far older than his 15 years. "You're choosing her over us?" he demanded. "Over your own family?" Leon flinched as if he'd been struck. "Tyler, no, that's not." "Then what is it, Dad?" Tyler's voice cracked. "Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what it looks like." I watched as the reality of the situation finally seemed to dawn on Leon. He looked from Tyler to me, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Tyler, I didn't realize how much this was hurting you." But Tyler wasn't done. Years of bottled-up pain and resentment came pouring out. "You've barely been here for months. You missed my basketball finals, my science fair, and for what? For her?" Each word seemed to hit Leon like a physical blow. He stumbled back, collapsing onto a kitchen chair. "I've made such a mess of everything," he murmured. I wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out, but the anger that had been simmering for weeks finally boiled over. "You don't get to play the victim here, Leon. You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences." Just then, Leon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling further. "It's Edith," he said. "She says if I don't come over right now, she'll get rid of the baby." The kitchen fell silent. I could see the war raging behind Leon's eyes, the pull of obligation against the love for his family. "Go," I said, my voice cold. "If that's what you really want, then go. But understand this, if you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." Tyler's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "Mom," I held up a hand, silencing him. This was between me and Leon now. Leon stood slowly, his movements heavy. He looked at Tyler, then at me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for everything." And then he was gone, the sound of the front door closing echoing through the suddenly too quiet house. Tyler turned to me, his face a mix of anger and desperation. How could he just leave like that, after everything? I pulled him into a fierce hug, feeling his body shake with sobs. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know." As I held my son, I felt something inside me harden. Leon had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to protect Tyler and rebuild our lives, with or without Leon. The sound of a car engine starting outside made Tyler stiffen in my arms. We both knew it was Leon driving away from us, towards Edith, towards the life he thought he wanted. "What do we do now?" Tyler asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. "Now," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We fight, for ourselves, for our family, and we don't look back." As the sound of Leon's car faded into the distance, I felt a strange mix of grief and determination wash over me. This was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms. The silence in the house was deafening. Tyler had retreated to his room, and I found myself pacing the living room, my mind racing. It had been hours since Leon left, and the uncertainty was eating away at me. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leon. "Meet me at Edith's apartment. Now." My heart raced as I called out to Tyler. "I have to go out. Stay here and lock the doors." "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with worry. I forced a smile. I'm not sure, but I'll be back soon, I promise. The drive to Edith's apartment was a blur. When I arrived, I found Leon sitting on the steps, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, his face a mask of anguish. Irma, he said, his voice breaking. I've made a terrible mistake. Before I could respond, the door behind him flew open. Edith stood there, her eyes, her pregnant belly protruding beneath a tight shirt. So, the wife finally shows up? She sneered. Come to beg for your husband back? I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. I'm here because Leon asked me to come, nothing more. Edith laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Well, isn't that sweet? Too bad he's not going anywhere. Are you Leon? Leon stood, slowly, positioning himself between us. That's enough, Edith. I'm done with your lies. Edith's face contorted with rage. Lies? You want to talk about lies? How about the fact that this baby might not even be yours? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Leon stumbled back as if he'd been struck. What are you talking about? Edith's smile was cruel. Oh, Leon, did you really think you were the only one? You were just a means to an end, a comfortable life, financial security. That's all I wanted from you. I watched as the last vestiges of Leon's delusion crumbled. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Irma, I don't know what to say. But Edith wasn't finished. She advanced on us, her voice rising hysterically. You think this changes anything? I'll ruin you both. I'll take everything you have. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the pain, the anger, the betrayal of the past months came rushing to the surface. I stepped forward, my voice low and dangerous. No, Edith, you won't. Because if you try, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who and what you are. Every lie, every con, every man you've manipulated. It all ends here. Edith's face paled, but her eyes blazed with defiance. You're bluffing. You have nothing on me. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screen. Are you sure about that? I have statements from your previous victims, bank records, even a confession from your own mother. It's over, Edith. For a moment, I thought she might lunge at me. But then, like a puppet with its strings cut, she crumpled to the ground, sobbing. Leon moved towards her, but I caught his arm. Don't, I said firmly. She needs help, but not from you. Not anymore. As if on cue, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I had called them before arriving, a precaution that now seemed prescient. Leon turned to me, his face a mix of gratitude and shame. Irma, I'm so sorry for everything. Matt, can we try to fix this? I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I had loved, the father of my child, stood before me, broken and humbled. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out. But another part, the part that had endured the pain and betrayal, held firm. I don't know, Leon, I said honestly. Right now, I need to focus on Tyler, on healing our family. Whatever happens between us, that's going to take time. As the police cars pulled up and officers approached, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The storm that had been raging for months was finally breaking. What came next, I didn't know, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. On my own terms. I turned to Leon, my voice steady. Let's go home. Tyler's waiting. As we walked away from Edith's apartment, leaving the chaos behind, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to redefine what family meant to us. And whatever the future held, I knew one thing for certain. We would face it together. Stronger for having weathered this storm. The weeks following the confrontation with Edith were a whirlwind of legal meetings, therapy sessions, and long, difficult conversations. Leon had moved back into the house, sleeping in the guest room, while we tried to navigate our new reality. But the fragile peace we'd established was about to face its ultimate test. I was in the kitchen, absently stirring a pot of coffee, when Leon walked in. His face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Irma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? I nodded, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Leon took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about everything that's happened. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right. Please, give us another chance. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I had loved for 17 years, the father of my child, stood before me, broken and humbled. Part of me wanted to say yes to try and rebuild what we'd lost, but another part, the part that had endured the pain and betrayal, held firm. Leon, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. I appreciate that you want to make amends, but too much has happened. This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about Tyler, about our family. Leon's face crumpled. I know I've hurt Tyler. I want to make it up to him, to both of you. Just then, Tyler walked into the kitchen. He stopped short when he saw us, his eyes darting between his father and me. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice wary. I took a deep breath. "Your father and I were just talking about our future, about what's best for all of us." Tyler's jaw set in a determined line. "And what did you decide?" I looked at Leon, then back at our son. "I think it's time we all had an honest conversation about that." For the next hour we talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. Tyler spoke about his anger, his feelings of abandonment. Leon listened, tears streaming down his face as he realized the full impact of his actions. And I found myself speaking truths I'd been holding back for too long. "I love you both," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But love isn't always enough. We need trust, respect, and a shared vision for our future. And right now, I'm not sure we have that." Leon nodded, his face a mask of pain and understanding. "I know I've broken your trust, both of you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it back if you'll let me." Tyler looked at his father, then at me. "What does this mean for us, for our family?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "It means we're going to move forward, but in a different way. Your father and we're going to separate, officially." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Tyler's eyes widened, but I saw a flicker of relief there, too. "But," I continued, reaching out to take Tyler's hand, "we're still a family, just a different kind of family. One where both your father and I can be the best versions of ourselves for you." Leon nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "Your mother's right. We both love you more than anything, Tyler. That will never change." As the reality of our decision settled over us, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, it felt right. We spent the rest of the day together, not as a married couple and their son, but as three individuals finding a new way to be a family. We laughed, we cried, and we began the process of healing. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight to reclaim my sense of self. I realized that while I hadn't emerged unscathed, I had emerged stronger. I thought about the women who had supported me through this ordeal. Tessa, with her unwavering friendship, my mother with her tough love, even Edith's mother Brenda, whose revelations had helped me see the truth. And I thought about Tyler, our beautiful, resilient son who had shown a strength beyond his years. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. Not as Leon's wife, not as a victim of betrayal, but as Irma, mother, nurse, survivor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, and new opportunities for growth. And I would meet them head-on, with the knowledge that I was capable of weathering any storm. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would lead.
I'm Rachel, a 32-year-old who used to think that fairy tales had happy ends. When I met Mark, the guy who would become my husband, 3 years ago, my life took an unexpected turn. This is our story, an apparently flawless marriage serving as the backdrop for a journey of love, trust, and ultimately betrayal. I was destined to find the corner cafe on a typical Tuesday morning. Holding a John Grisham book, I became engrossed in the realm of legal thrillers. At that point, Mark showed up. It didn't take long to notice him. Although he exuded confidence, there was an enticing warmth to his smile. "Hi, is that the most recent work by Grisham?" he inquired, gesturing to my book. His tone was kind and full of sincere interest. "Yes, I've just started," I replied, pleasantly surprised by how easy our discussion flowed. He's always a good read. We struck up a conversation that flowed as we discussed our favorite authors. Mark had a funny and charming sense of humor that always made me smile. Ours picked up speed, making us feel more like two newly acquainted acquaintances than old buddies catching up. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I grew closer. Our shared interests in music, particularly old jazz, and a mutual love for exploring hidden bookstores around the city cemented our bond. He was charming, respectful, and attentive. I found myself eagerly anticipating our dates, each encounter leaving me more enchanted. One evening as we walked along the river, Mark's tone turned serious. "Rachel, I've never felt this way before. I think I'm falling for you," he confessed under the dim glow of the streetlights. His words sent a rush of warmth through me. "I feel the same, Mark. You're unlike anyone I've ever met," I admitted, my heart racing with excitement and a hint of fear. 6 months flew by, and our relationship only grew stronger. It was during a cozy dinner at my apartment when Mark proposed. The moment was simple yet profoundly sincere. There was no hesitation in my yes. I loved him, and I believed in our future together. The joy of our engagement, however, was soon met with apprehension as the time came to meet Mark's parents. His mother, Linda, was a stern woman with piercing eyes that seemed to judge my every move. His father was more amiable, but there was an undeniable seriousness to him, especially regarding the institution of marriage. During a formal dinner at their house, Mark's father brought up the subject of a prenuptial agreement. "It's just practical," he stated matter-of-factly. The request caught me off guard, but given my past experience with a cheating ex-boyfriend, I understood the necessity. "I agree, but I have a condition," I said, steadying my voice. "If either of us cheats, the cheater owes the other $100,000. Mark's expression was a mix of surprise and respect. "I promise, Rachel, I'd never cheat on you," he said earnestly. I wanted to believe him, to trust that this time my heart was safe. Our wedding was a beautiful affair filled with laughter, dancing, and promises of forever. The first year of our marriage felt like living in a dream. We traveled to romantic destinations, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and supported each other's ambitions. Mark was not just my husband, he was my best friend, my confidant. After the whirlwind of our wedding, Mark and I settled into married life with an ease that surprised even me. Our first year was like living in a bubble of happiness, untouched by the outside world. Our honeymoon in Paris was a dream. Strolling along the Seine, we were just two lovebirds lost in a city of love. "Can you believe we're here?" I asked Mark one evening as we watched the Eiffel Tower light up. He pulled me close and said, "With you, I can believe anything. This is just the start for us, Rachel." Those days were filled with laughter, romantic dinners, and promises of a future together. We returned home with a suitcase full of memories and a bond that felt unbreakable. Back home, our days found a comfortable routine. Mark would kiss me goodbye every morning before heading to work, and I'd be waiting with dinner when he got back. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversation stretching late into the night. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Mark said, "You know, I never thought I'd be this happy just doing mundane stuff like washing dishes." I playfully splashed some water at him. "That's because you've got an amazing wife. It's all about good company," he laughed, catching the water in his hands. "Absolutely. Best decision of my life, marrying you." Despite our happiness, there was a growing pressure from outside, the expectation of starting a family. At family gatherings, Mark's mom, Linda, would often drop not-so-subtle hints. "So when are we going to hear some good news?" Linda asked one Sunday lunch, her tone laced with expectation. I tried to brush it off with a joke. "Oh, you'll be the first to know when there's news." But her persistence grew over time and started to strain me. Mark noticed my discomfort but reassured me, "Don't let my mom get to you. We'll start a family when we're ready, not a minute sooner." Despite these pressures, our first year of marriage was magical. We celebrated our first anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. Mark surprised me with a necklace I had admired months ago. "Happy anniversary, Rachel. Here's to many more years of happiness," he said, his eyes shining with love. I felt tears prick my eyes as I said, "Thank you, Mark. I couldn't have asked for a better partner in life." That night, as we cuddled on the couch, I couldn't help but feel incredibly lucky. I had a husband who loved me, a cozy home, and a future that seemed bright. As our second year of marriage began, the pressure from Mark's family, especially his mother Linda, started to take a toll on me. It wasn't just about starting a family anymore. Her criticisms seeped into every aspect of our lives. Linda had a way of making her disapproval known, often under the guise of helpful comments. Every visit became a nightmare for me. One afternoon, as I was setting the table for lunch, she walked into the kitchen and eyed the spread with a disapproving frown. "Is this what you're serving? A bit simple, don't you think?" Linda remarked, her tone dripping with disdain. I clenched my jaw, trying to maintain my composure. "I thought we'd enjoy something light today." She just sniffed, muttering under her breath about proper meals and good housekeeping. Her comments weren't just confined to my cooking. She found fault in everything I did, from the way I decorated the house to how I spent my free time. Nothing was off limits. One evening, while Mark and I were relaxing in the living room, Linda decided to give her unsolicited opinion. "You know, Rachel, if Mark gave me the money he spends on you, I could hire a proper cleaner and a cook." Mark looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. His silence felt like a betrayal. I was seething but managed to say, "Well, Linda, I'm doing my best here." What hurt the most was how Mark's attitude started to change. He began echoing his mother's criticisms, albeit in a more subtle way. After one of Linda's visits, Mark casually mentioned, "Mom might have a point about the house. Maybe we should consider getting some help." I felt a pang of hurt and frustration. "So you think I can't handle it either?" I asked, my voice trembling. "No, that's not what I meant," he backpedaled, but the damage was done. The constant criticisms and Mark's growing detachment were straining our marriage. We started having arguments over trivial things, our once easy conversations turning into tense exchanges. After a particularly heated argument, I found myself wondering aloud, "What happened to us, Mark? We used to be on the same team." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I don't know, Rachel. It's just everything feels so complicated now." I went to bed that night feeling lonely and misunderstood. Linda's insidious comments had not only invaded my home, but were also creeping into my marriage, leaving me to wonder if the love Mark and I shared was strong enough to withstand this constant barrage of negativity. As the third year of our marriage rolled in, a sense of unease began to settle in my heart. The once bright flame of our love seemed to flicker under the shadow of doubt and mistrust. It started with a phone call, or rather, several of them. A name kept popping up on Mark's phone, Jake. I couldn't help but notice how Mark's demeanor changed whenever that name flashed on the screen. One evening, while we were watching TV, his phone rang again. Jake. The screen flashed. Mark quickly silenced it and put the phone away, but not before I saw the nervous glance he threw my way. "Who's Jake?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding. "Oh, just a new guy at work. No one important," Mark replied, but his voice was too nonchalant, his answer too rehearsed. Mark's behavior began to change. He started coming home late from work, his excuses flimsy and inconsistent. His wardrobe underwent a transformation too, from casual to sharply tailored suits. Working late again, I questioned one night as he prepared to leave, noticing his dressed-up appearance. "Yeah, a big project," he said without meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." One day my frustration boiled over. As Mark was about to leave for another late night at work, I confronted him. "This isn't like you, Mark. What's really going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. Mark sighed, his expression a mix of guilt and annoyance. "I told you it's just work. Why can't you trust me?" "Because you're hiding something. You're never here, and when you are, it's like you're a million miles away," I shot back, my eyes stinging with tears. Mark didn't respond. He just grabbed his coat and left, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. That night, lying in our empty bed, I made a decision. I couldn't live in this limbo of doubt and suspicion. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. The next morning, I called a private detective. It felt like a betrayal, but the constant worry and uncertainty were eating me alive. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them, no matter what they revealed about the man I thought I knew. The days after contacting the private detective were a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy while my world was quietly crumbling around me. Then the call came, and with it, the shattering of my last hope. "Mrs. Johnson, we have conclusive evidence. I'm afraid your suspicions were correct." The detective's voice was solemn, heavy with the weight of the news he was delivering. He explained that Mark had been having an affair. The mysterious Jake on his phone was actually a woman. My heart sank as he detailed their meetings, providing timestamps and photos. It was irrefutable. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of devastation and vindication. My worst fears weren't just fears anymore. They were cold, hard facts. Despite the pain, I decided not to confront Mark immediately. I needed more than just the evidence of his infidelity. I needed to understand the full extent of his deceit. One evening, as I was passing by his home office, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Mark was talking to his mother, Linda. "Mom, I'm planning to end it with Rachel after your birthday." Mark's voice was cold, devoid of any affection he once had for me. "Oh, that's wise, dear. Make sure she gets me a nice 65th birthday present before you drop the bomb," Linda replied, her voice laced with a callousness that took my breath away. I leaned against the wall, feeling nauseous. Not only was my husband unfaithful, but he and his mother were plotting against me, waiting to use me for one last expensive gift before discarding me. Fueled by a mixture of anger and resolve, I decided to play along. I continued as if nothing was wrong while secretly gathering more evidence of Mark's infidelity. The detective provided me with everything: photos, videos, and even audio recordings. I was building my case, preparing for the moment I would strike back. As I lay in bed each night next to the man who had betrayed me, a plan began to form in my mind. I would wait until after Linda's birthday. I would give them the illusion of victory, let them think they had outsmarted me. But when they least expected it, I would reveal everything and turn the tables. As Linda's 65th birthday approached, I put on a mask of ignorance, acting as though everything was normal. Inside, I was a cauldron of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to see my plan through. A few days before the birthday, Linda casually mentioned her upcoming celebration during a family dinner. "So, Rachel, I'm expecting a grand 65th birthday. You must have planned something special for me," she said with a saccharine smile, clearly anticipating a lavish gift. Keeping my emotions in check, I replied with faint enthusiasm, "Of course, Linda. I've arranged a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. It'll be a night to remember." Her eyes lit up with glee, not realizing the trap I was setting. "Oh, how wonderful. I can't wait. Just a small family gathering, right?" "Yes, very intimate and exclusive, just for close family," I confirmed, my words laced with hidden irony. Later that night, Mark approached me, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's quite a generous plan for Mum's birthday. Are you sure about this?" I looked at him, maintaining my composure. "Absolutely. It's a significant birthday, and I want to do something special for her." Mark seemed appeased, but I could tell he was puzzled by my willingness to indulge his mother. As the day of the dinner drew near, I took care of the final arrangements. I confirmed the booking in Linda's name, rechecked the guest list, and made sure everything was set for the grand evening. I was playing the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, but underneath the facade, I was ready to expose the betrayal and deceit that had been festering in our marriage. The night before the dinner, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. I was hours away from turning the tables on Mark and Linda. They thought they were using me for one last benefit before discarding me. Little did they know I was the one controlling the game now. The evening of Linda's 65th birthday was set in a luxurious restaurant. Every detail was meticulously planned to reflect the grandeur of the occasion. As Linda reveled in the opulence, I played the part of the gracious daughter-in-law, masking my inner turmoil with a practiced smile. As the dinner drew to a close, the waiter presented the bill, $4,500. I reached for my card with a steady hand, my heart pounding in my chest. After swiping the card, I glanced around the table, seeing Linda's satisfied smirk and Mark's uneasy expression. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Rachel. This is truly generous," Linda said, her voice dripping with insincerity. It was then that Mark leaned in, his voice laced with mockery. "By the way, Rachel, I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see my pain. Linda, seizing the moment, chimed in sharply. "Well then, I guess you should leave. This is a family gathering after all." Without a word, I stood up and left the restaurant, my dignity intact despite the turmoil inside. As I walked away, I pulled out my phone and swiftly canceled the payment. Then, with a few more taps, I blocked the shared account. Mark couldn't cover the cost either. Back at home, I packed my belongings quickly, the finality of my actions setting in. I was leaving this chapter of my life behind, stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. Soon, my phone erupted with calls. I answered, and Linda's voice, shrill with rage and panic, filled my ears. The payment didn't go through. The restaurant staff called the police. "What have you done?" Her words were a cacophony of anger and disbelief, but I remained silent, letting her tirade wash over me. This was their doing, their betrayal and manipulation coming back to haunt them. After hanging up, I looked around the empty house, a place once filled with dreams and love, now just a hollow shell. I took a deep breath, stepped out the door, and didn't look back. Their calls continued, a desperate plea for help that I no longer felt obliged to answer. I had made my move, exposed their deceit, and now it was time for me to rebuild away from the lies and the pain that had defined my life for far too long. After leaving my marital home, I spent a restless night at a friend's place, my mind racing with what needed to be done next. The morning sun brought with it a sense of clarity and determination. It was time for the final confrontation. I arrived at the house to find Mark and Linda waiting, their faces a mix of anger and confusion, clutching the divorce papers and the evidence of Mark's infidelity. I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Linda was the first to break the silence, her voice dripping with scorn. "So you've come crawling back after embarrassing us like that?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm not here to crawl. I'm here for a divorce." Mark, who announced our divorce a day ago, suddenly tried to win everything back. "Rachel, can't we talk about this? It was a mistake." I cut him off, holding up the evidence. "Save it, Mark. Your mistake was ongoing and well documented." Linda scoffed, trying to regain control. "You think you can just walk away and leave us with nothing. You're nothing without us." I laid the divorce papers on the table. "Actually, it's you who will be leaving me with something. According to our prenup, Mark owes me $100,000 for his infidelity." Mark's face went pale, and Linda's eyes widened in shock as they scrambled to respond. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. This was it, the end of the lies, the deceit, and the pain. "You can try to fight this, but the evidence is clear. I suggest you pay up and move on," I said, my voice steady. Linda had lost her customary boldness and was dumbfounded, while Mark appeared defeated. I turned and left the house without saying anything more, feeling a sense of liberation as the door closed behind me. The subsequent appeals and calls were ignored. I had permanently closed that chapter of my life. They ultimately had to pay. Although Mark needed to borrow money from his parents, I didn't give a damn where it came from. It provided some little comfort for the betrayal, but more than anything, it brought finality. I felt at ease when I signed the final paperwork while sitting in the attorney's office. Despite the difficult journey filled with heartbreak and betrayal, I emerged stronger and more resilient. Feeling liberated, I ventured outside into the daylight, eager to begin afresh. Though everything remained unclear, I might still influence the future. I felt like I was finally entering the light after all the darkness.
You had leukemia, didn't you? Can't believe you're still alive. My father, who had chosen his mistress over me, and my mother 15 years ago when I was diagnosed at age 10, uttered these unbelievable words when we unexpectedly met at a restaurant. And who's that girl next to you? Surely she's not your child. The father's gaze shifted to Mia, who sat beside me, his expression sour. Yes, she's my daughter. I got married 3 years ago. I thought you'd be struggling and living in poverty. Just like you and your mother, always a burden to society. Angered by his words, I stood up, unable to tolerate any insult towards my mother, who had raised me single-handedly. Well, it's been a while. Welcome to my restaurant. My father, surprised by my mother's words, visibly widened his eyes in clear astonishment. What, you're joking? That's not funny at all. Oh, I'll explain properly then. Seeking revenge, my mother began to tell him about our current lives. I'm Anna, 25 years old. Today, I am here for lunch at a famous hamburger specialty restaurant with my husband Tony and our 1-year-old daughter Mia. This popular restaurant recently expanded its stores, a place we had always wanted to visit. My mother was supposed to join us for lunch too, but she's running late due to a train delay. Mama, gimme. Yes, just wait a bit longer. I watched my daughter, Mia, pointing at the food on the next table, clearly hungry and begging for food. Did you hear from Mom? Yes, she just arrived at the station. She should be here soon. Do you think the restaurant is hard to find? I'll go pick her up from the station. Tony, thank you. With that, Tony quickly put on his coat and left the restaurant. I thought, he's always so thoughtful. I'm glad I married him. I've always wanted a warm family because my parents divorced when I was 10. My mother told me that even when I was little, my father prioritized having fun over taking care of his kids. I remember him ignoring me even when I was sick in bed, and my parents often fought. Still, my mother took great care of me. She always came to my school events, but my father, busy with work, never came. The turning point for our family came when I was 10. One day, I was bedridden at home with a high fever. Every doctor we saw said it was just a cold. However, the fever continued for weeks without any sign of subsiding. As 2 weeks approached, my parents argued about whether to take me to a university hospital. I've told you many times. She's had a high fever for 2 weeks. It's just a coincidence. The doctor said it's a cold. Besides, do you know how much it costs to go to a university hospital? It's just a waste of money. How can you say that when Anna is suffering? Just do whatever you want. I'm not giving you any money. With that, my father left. I was delirious, but I still remember his back as he walked away. Shortly after, my mother took me to the university hospital, and I underwent a thorough examination. When it was over, the doctor spoke seriously to my mother. Please stay calm. The tests show she has leukemia. That can't be. If we had delayed the tests any longer, it could have been dangerous. You did well to bring her in. Hearing that, my mother apparently cried, relieved she hadn't made a mistake. I was soon admitted to the hospital and began treatment. Fortunately, the treatment started quickly and I was young enough to recover well. So my condition stabilized in about a month. My mother had kept in touch with my father, but he never visited during my hospitalization. When I was discharged and returned home, my father was no longer there. As I was confused, my mother calmly explained, "Anna, listen carefully. Your father probably won't come back." "Mom, what do you mean?" "Your father had been seeing another woman. As soon as he found out you were sick, he stopped contacting us. I guessed he would just leave." "Can't I see Dad anymore?" "He chose his mistress over us." Understanding this, I felt an overwhelming sadness. Seeing me about to cry, my mother hugged me gently. "It's okay, you have me. I won't let you feel lonely." As she said that, she hugged me even tighter. From then on, she raised me alone. While working, she took care of me and showered me with love. Though our time together was short, I never felt lonely. Gradually, I wanted to become a strong and kind woman like her. As I remembered these old times, I waited for Tony to return with my mother. Then, a familiar voice called out my name. "Anna, is that you?" I turned around in surprise to see an elderly man in ragged clothes. His beard was overgrown, and his hair looked unwashed for days. He was far from well dressed. I thought, I feel like I've seen him somewhere. I racked my brain but couldn't remember where. As I looked puzzled, the man laughed mockingly. "Don't you remember your own father's face? You're still foolish as ever." "Dad. Why are you here?" "What do you mean why?" "I came to eat." "Is that a problem?" "Not really." Indeed, his smiling face resembled my father's from long ago. But my father should be 55 now. The man standing before me, dressed as he was, looked over 70. I thought I would never see my father again after he abandoned us. As a child, every time I remembered him and felt sad, I tried hard to forget him. Perhaps that's why I didn't recognize him immediately. More than the joy of seeing my father after so many years, I felt a complex mix of emotions. At a loss for words, my father spoke again. "I mean, I didn't think you'd still be alive." "What do you mean?" "You know, you had leukemia, right? Thanks to Mom taking me to the hospital right away, I recovered quickly. I still go to the hospital regularly. If we had delayed even a little, I might not have been able to live a normal life." "Ha, that's good," I thought, his casual remark, after he insisted on leaving me alone back then. I felt anger rise within me as my father laughed it off as if it were someone else's problem. I glared at him, but he continued the conversation without concern. "So, who's the girl next to you? Surely not your child?" I looked at Mia sitting beside me. My father's expression was somewhat displeased. "Yes, she's my daughter. I got married 3 years ago. Her name is Mia. She's 1 year old." What's the problem?" "It's none of your business. I thought you'd be struggling and living in poverty. After all, you and Susan are just burdens to society." "How dare you say that?" I stood up abruptly and raised my voice. Mia looked up at me, startled. I knew talking to him was pointless. I understood that. But I couldn't stand him insulting my mother, who had endured so much to raise me. Indeed, at the time, it seems it was quite a struggle to come up with the money for my sudden hospitalization and subsequent frequent visits. I saw my mother pleading with the hospital to delay payments while I was admitted. That's why I am so grateful and respectful toward her. And each time, my disdain for my father grew. With Mia present and not wanting to disturb the other customers, I couldn't afford to start a fight here. As my father and I were glaring at each other, Tony returned with my mother. Seeing me standing, Tony asked worriedly, "Anna, what happened? And who is this man?" "This is my father." "What? I thought your parents divorced when you were little." "Why is he here?" "I don't know. He just happened to be here. So, I came here to eat." "Got a problem with that?" my father said grumpily, creating a tense atmosphere among us. Then my mother, standing behind Tony, addressed my father. "Wow, long time no see. How many years has it been?" "Ah, you're here too. It's been a while. I never thought we'd meet again." "Why are you here? This place is popular lately, right?" "Wanted to try it out." "Oh, I'm glad. Welcome to my restaurant." My father's eyes widened, clearly taken aback by my mother's words. And he began to laugh weakly. "Ha, your restaurant? That's a good joke." "It's no joke. This is my restaurant. Well, one of many I own." "What do you mean?" My father was confused by my mother's unexpected statement. But she explained calmly. "Just as I said. I own this hamburger specialty store. It was originally a small business started by my father. After you left, I started helping out to make ends meet. Thanks to Mom getting involved, the stores started to multiply. Aren't we about to go national soon? No way you could do that. It's just a coincidence, isn't it?" My father seemed unwilling to acknowledge my mother's success. Just as I was about to retort, Tony spoke up. "Father, no offense, but maybe it's time you accepted it? Are you Anna's husband? What does this have to do with you? What do you even know?" "Well, it does concern me. Actually, I work at the corporate headquarters of this company." "That's right. Tony is one of our promising young executives. He's currently working as an executive candidate at the headquarters. Susan's ideas and proposals are always customer-oriented and have gained a lot of support within the company." "Thank you. I have high expectations for you." No, thank you very much." Tony and my mother spoke happily. Seeing them, I felt proud. Glancing at my father, his mouth hung open in shock. He looked down on my mother, who had become a company owner. And me, a frail child who married a promising young employee and had a child. He couldn't accept that the two he abandoned were leading happy lives. "What? I don't care about you guys." With that parting shot, my father hurried to the entrance. However, he hadn't paid yet and was stopped by a staff member trying to leave the restaurant without paying. He was then taken to the back office. After a while, a police car pulled up in front of the store. 3 officers entered and headed to the office. Watching the scene, a person who appeared to be the manager hurried over to my mother to explain the situation. It turns out my father was a habitual offender of dining and dashing. Not just at this hamburger store, but he had also caused trouble at other nearby stores. This time, he was caught in the act and arrested. He's been resisting the police. I could hear him talking loudly. It seems he's been having trouble with his family, and that led to his actions. After saying this to my mother, the manager returned to the office. I wondered what kind of situation had led my once hardworking father to resort to such measures. Seeing the father who had lost all semblance of his former self, I felt a bit of pity. The atmosphere at our table went completely silent. Then, my mother suddenly clapped her hands, looking at me and Tony. Now that the troublemaker is gone, let's enjoy a delicious meal. Mom. The new seasonal hamburger is really something special. Tony, I'm sorry for involving you in our family issues. No, I don't mind at all. As my mother spoke, I felt my tense heart begin to relax. She must have been trying to create a bright atmosphere for me and Tony. I thought, I guess I still can't match up to my mother. With that thought, I decided to forget about my father and enjoy lunch with the four of us. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. I thought, I've been contacting various places lately for Mia's daycare. Maybe it's related to that. I didn't have any strong leads, but I answered the phone anyway. To my dismay, it was the last voice I wanted to hear. It was my father. Hello? Anna? Dad? How did you get my number? Well, that doesn't matter, does it? Laughing carelessly, I wondered where he had gotten my number. Despite my anxiety, now wasn't the time to worry about that. The more pressing question was why he had called. Given that he had been driven to petty crimes, I didn't know what to expect from him now. I cautiously asked him, "So, what do you want? What are you planning to do to us?" "Hey, don't be so cold. I've actually got a good proposal for you and your mom." "What do you mean by a good proposal?" "Listen up and be happy. I'll remarry Susan. Knowing her, she's probably still single, right?" "Dad, do you realize what you're saying?" "Of course, I do. Aren't you happy? Is this man insane? How could he think that abandoning us and then proposing to remarry would make us happy? There's no way my mother would accept it. How could I be happy about that? Have you forgotten what you did to us in the past? You mean when I left? If you want me to apologize, I'm sorry. The selfishness of my father infuriates me. I feel like I might say something harsh in anger. But I can't upset him now. I have my mother, Tony, and Mia to think about. I need to stay calm for their sake. My left hand, holding the smartphone, trembles with anger. Gripping it with my right hand to steady it, I asked my father, "So, what brought this on all of a sudden? What happened with the woman you were with?" "Oh, her? After I left home, a while later, we had a son." "I see. I thought I'd live happily with my new family. Especially since my sick daughter was out of the picture. But that woman, she was reckless with money. Even after our son was born, she never stopped going out. Kept buying designer bags, and before I knew it, she had run up debts without my knowledge. By the time I realized, she had vanished." My father spoke calmly about his situation, which was more troubled than I had imagined. I had assumed he was living happily after leaving us, but it seems that was not the case. His disheveled appearance and his dine and dash habits now made sense. He must have had his struggles. But that doesn't mean I should feel sorry for him. Look, she's got money, right? Think of it as filial piety and ask your mom, would you? Unbelievable. What? Don't bring this up now. How could you think I would forgive you? Hey, calm down. I am calm. Handle your own money. And don't ever involve us again. With that, I hung up the phone. He abandoned my mother and me when we were vulnerable. And now he turns to us when he's in trouble. He truly is the worst. I immediately informed my mother about the call. So I told him never to contact us again. I see. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Anna. It's okay. It's unbelievable, though. Did he really think I'd accept such a ridiculous proposal? My mother sighed in disbelief. She told me to ignore any further attempts to contact us and hung up the phone. Just as my mother predicted, calls from what seemed to be my father's number came several times. I ignored all of them, and eventually, they stopped. He must have given up after being ignored so thoroughly. One day, I took Mia to visit my mother, who had just finished a busy period and was happy to see her granddaughter. Mia was also having a great time. While chatting with my mother and playing with Mia, the doorbell suddenly rang. Oh, what could that be? Maybe it's a delivery? Should I get it? You keep playing with Mia. Would you? Thank you. I stood up and went to the intercom. My blood ran cold when I saw who was on the screen. It was my father. I thought, how? I never told him where we moved. My heart raced as I struggled to stay calm and breathed deeply. Mom, Dad's here. What do you mean? He shouldn't know where we live since he left and we moved. He might have come here because I ignored his calls. But how did he find the house? While talking with my mother, the doorbell rang again. We decided to pretend no one was home, trying not to make any noise. However, the doorbell continued to ring repeatedly. Despite our continued silence, the knocking on the front door began, growing louder and more insistent. Hey, I know you're in there. Open the door. What should we do? You guys have money. Hurry up and hand it over. My father was getting increasingly agitated, raising his voice dangerously. It wasn't safe anymore, not for my mom or Mia. Something had to be done. Just then, my mother suddenly stood up and walked toward the door. And to my disbelief, she opened it. I thought, Mom, what are you doing? I hurried after her to the entrance. As my mother opened the door, my father tried to barge in. Despite this, my mother began to speak calmly. What are you doing? It's about time you opened up. You have money, right? Hand it over quickly. Yes, we do have money. But there's none for you. Just as my father attempted to strike her, a police officer grabbed his arm from behind. All right, calm down, please. The police? We received a call earlier. You're under arrest for trespassing. Trespassing? But she's my wife. Ignoring my father's protests, the police officers quickly restrained him and took him to their patrol car. As I stood there dumbfounded, my mother calmly locked the door. Mom, how could you remain so calm? You said there was a call earlier, but who? Oh, I called the police while you were checking the intercom. Really? I didn't notice at all. The police can't arrest someone without catching them in the act. That's why I deliberately let him in. As I slumped down, exhausted by the ordeal, my mother chuckled. How strong could one person be? I wondered if I would ever catch up to her. Later, we were informed by the police that my father was jailed. He was not only arrested for this incident but was also charged with multiple other offenses, including shoplifting and dine and dashing. Unable to afford bail, he remained in custody. My mother also concerned herself with my father's son, contacting child services. They later informed us that the boy, now a junior in high school, was living in a facility. He was doing well and excelling academically. So they assured us there wasn't much to worry about. Although he wasn't living with his father, he occasionally visited him. Look, Mia, here's the new hamburger. Eat up. Thanks, Grandma. Years have passed, and Mia has grown significantly. Watching their cheerful conversation fills me with happiness. I never thought I'd be so disrupted by my father at this age. While I feel sorry for him, I certainly don't aspire to be like him. Instead, I'll use his example as a lesson on how not to live, striving for a happy life.